Hello and welcome to all the men and women of the West. I'm Joe, here with me is my co-host Dan.
Hello and greetings.
Today we're going to be delving into a rather controversial topic, to say the least, given the title. And this is going to be our first Warcraft video in a while. Amongst a lot of fans, the question of the rectitude of Arthas' actions is often questioned. Other times, it isn't. The thing about Arthas' behavior regarding Stratholme in particular and afterwards is often discussed, sometimes heatedly, sometimes not, with there being one particular viewpoint that I find utterly ridiculous and kind of really dumb after watching one of Asmongold's videos where he watches someone who says Arthas was entirely justified and that had Arthas not gone to Northrend, Mal'Ganis would have said, well, shucks, I guess I'm just gonna have to pack it in and the Burning Legion's gonna have to give up on getting itself a Lich-king, which I think is utterly ridiculous. The Burning Legion was committed to getting themselves a Lich-king. To an extent, they're committed to having it be Arthas, as seen with Mal'Ganis' many manipulations of him. But I'm going to propose that there was a second candidate of sorts, which you might have guessed from the title. To get to this character's own kind of corruption, or possible corruption, we have to kind of analyze his position and influence within Lordaeron. Uther Lightbringer, he's a man who confronts the undead alongside Arthas at one point in the story before Stratholme.
Just before the incident of Stratholme, though, he's informed of the truth of how the undead are being created.
Seemingly unaware of how the plague is being spread. Seemingly. It's not like the undead were keeping some great secret about how they were doing it through infected food. When the time comes for Stratholme, Uther, he only seems to have the position of head of the Silver Hand, which itself seems a really odd assumption on the part of the fans. Now, I'm not calling anyone dumb or anything. It's just an odd assumption that this is the limit of his authority and influence. When we have to bear in mind, he was the main tutor of Arthas. It is interesting that the first person Tyrannus would often listen to would be Uther, in particular after the war. During the war with Orgrim Doomhammer and the rest of the Horde, Tyrannus Menethil was a powerful war king, a king who conquered the Horde. Let's be honest, Lordaeron basically curb-stomped the Horde almost single-handedly with its own military resources and whatnot. So Lordaeron was pretty much the Roman Empire in a way in this situation, curb-stomping its enemies. That said, Uther seems to have risen pretty high after the war. He was probably a successful officer who did well for himself during and after the war. The interesting thing is that he never objected to the weird camps in which the orcs were imprisoned in. He doesn't seem to have had any moral qualms with any questionable decision Tyrannus made, which begs the question, why? Tyrannus, in his last few years,
As the only scenes we see him in, he seems to be old and frail. What's more is that we don't see him taking to the field like Arthas does.
it is certainly Arthas to an extent who's taking on a lot of the managerial and administrative tasks, running around and doing what needs to be done. But in the early missions, it seems like it's closely under the authority and supervision of Uther. Uther is regent in all but name. He was the tutor of the crown prince. He is chief advisor. Looking at him in fantasy context and in medieval literature context, because fantasy is essentially the modern equivalent of medieval literature, this guy is on the make, as the British would put it. Here's my question. When Arthas says this city must be purged, I'm ordering the Order of the Silver Hand to wipe out these people. This is a decision that is a legitimate one, as 30,000 people
Thereabouts
are about to perish no matter what, and then they're going to go on to infect the rest of Lordaeron's population, which if we assume it's anything like the Roman Empire, let's say, that'd be 20 million. And if it's not, if it's just one, maybe up to, say, 5 million, 30,000 is still a big deal. And given how quickly this plague is spreading, and how quickly the undead take over Lordaeron after Arthas' return as a Death Knight, something has to be done about Stratholme. So the question is Uther offended by the act of destroying these people, or Arthas talking back to him?
as he doesn't offer any real resistance towards
Arthas
accomplishing the deed, or the misdeed, depending on your point of view. So that can't have been all that against it if he didn't do anything about it.
On top of that, there's the matter of Uther refusing to acknowledge Arthas' orders, even though technically Arthas is his superior officer. Arthas is crown prince and the acting royal on the scene at all times. Arthas is invested with the authority of Tyrannus. Tyrannus is too old to get into the field himself now. So it means that Arthas is Tyrannus' direct representative. Therefore, as the Order of the Silver Hand is subject to royal authority, given that every organization within Lordaeron probably answers to the king, it means that to defy Arthas is treason. And yet, Uther says, no, I'm not going to listen to you. Runs off, not having the courage to stand up to Arthas, though. Where does he head for? He sticks around long enough to go recruit Jaina after the massacre of Stratholme before rushing over to Tyrannus to start complaining about Arthas. Arthas then, driven by obsession with Mal'Ganis, goes off to Northrend, proceeds to have his adventures there. During his time there, Tyrannus orders back the forces and the fleet at seemingly what is worded as the request of Uther. By the time Arthas returns as Death Knight, Uther is no longer in the capital, right? And the reaction from Tyrannus is one of joy to see his son return. And the first thing Uther does after Tyrannus is slain is to secure the ashes of Tyrannus. He doesn't rush to the rescue of the capital, he rushes to secure the ashes. Always, Uther seems to be after the political prize. Anything to do with the king.
Which begs the question,
should we consider Uther a heroic character or a villain?
and what might have happened had
Arthas had, after Stratholme, decided he was not going to Northrend. What would happen next? Now, Arthas departed to secure the fleet and then took off for the north. Okay, but if he hadn't done that and continued to try to stamp out the undead plague from Lordaeron, I would suspect one of two events would happen. Uther makes for the capital of Lordaeron and secures Tyrannus. This done, and given that he had his paladins and a full militia under him, I would suspect that he would then try to secure Arthas. In event number one, Arthas is in the field and says, "What are you doing? No, I'm not listening to you." At which point we have a civil war within Lordaeron, because it's Uther claiming custody of the king against the wishes of the royal family, capture the capital and take the king and keep him from interacting himself with the prince. This is reminiscent of Henry III of England and Edward Plantagenet, the crown prince. So that the crown prince was basically forced to, while his father was captured by a baron called Montfort, was forced to fight to liberate his father.
like Simon de Montfort,
Uther wants authority over the crown in Lordaeron. So what's going to happen is Uther has to either march out to meet Arthas or he has to solidify the capital. Either way, there's a civil war. Who's going to win? The undead. Because the Scourge is going to come back and go, oh, well, hi guys. So Mal'Ganis is going to come back and probably get Arthas as a possible Death Knight. Or Arthas will beat Uther back and Uther will have to flee, and Uther, in my opinion, would probably flee north and pulling out Frostmourne. Or event number two. The second possibility is Arthas is in the capital. Uther seizes capital. Arthas is beheaded as a traitor. But given the popularity of Arthas, I don't think this would go over too well with the people of the city or the kingdom. Because it seems that despite what happened in Stratholme, the people of Lordaeron love Arthas. He's their blonde-haired, blue-eyed prince.
And then you have to consider Arthas' popularity in the military.
Oh yeah, because he was a strong military leader. The trouble is, Uther now has a problem on his hands. And unlike Arthas, seems intent on ignoring some of the worst crimes of the undead. The undead are going to then come in and infect the next biggest city after Stratholme. That's not Lordaeron. Uther will ignore the problem. Tyrannus will be heartbroken and a broken man. He was probably made to sign the execution of his son. Lordaeron will be in the grips of pretty poor time. The undead will overtake everything. And Kel'Thuzad will doubtlessly be revived no matter what. And Kel'Thuzad will, given that there's no Arthas to take command of the Scourge, will probably start to solidify his hold over the undead even more. I could see Uther possibly being driven from the capital city of Lordaeron, probably by the mob. And I still kind of see him ending up in Northrend, grabbing Frostmourne. Now, I know that's a big leap, but it would be a matter that he'd want to secure control of Lordaeron for himself. Given that Mal'Ganis is threatening the stability of Lordaeron, he's going to end up going after Mal'Ganis.
as much because he also can't really stay because the people are wanting to drive him out.
If Mal'Ganis is not going to move, but is still threatening Lordaeron, I see Uther kind of realizing he has to cut off the head of the snake. So he's going to go over to Northrend, be made to pull out Frostmourne, because there's no way he could beat Mal'Ganis without Frostmourne. The end result would probably, much as I'm not the biggest fan of Illidan, I don't really see Uther being able to beat Illidan. So Illidan might end up kind of destroying Frostmourne and saving the world. I kind of see that being the end result. I'm going to give Illidan some credit here, because Arthas defeating him, like he did, makes sense. But I do see Uther probably going a little more berserk than Arthas to an extent, but being a little less brilliant in terms of military strategies and just relying on numbers. Which, why not? You have an infinite army. Ultimately, everyone kind of paid the price for this political fallout. But that's maybe us just wanting to read a bit more into Warcraft, and also kind of side-eyeing a lot of the dialogue regarding Uther and by Uther, because linguistics do matter when it comes to fantasy and mythological fiction. And so, if you enjoyed this video,
And even if you didn't,
tell us what you think in the comment section, and don't don't forget to smash that like and that subscribe button as though you were the Death Knight Arthas hewing down Sylvanas Windrunner.